Hi, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning. Welcome to the technical working group meeting. We'll just give people a few more minutes before we start. Just see if we can get a few more people to join us, and then we'll get going. So thanks for your time and patience. We'll begin shortly. Okay, I think we'll get going. So welcome to everybody again. Thanks for joining. We are recording this, so anyone who doesn't attend will have a copy. Small group, so please feel free to stop us as we go through this. Familiar names, it's good to have you here just before you guys in the US break for your holidays. So we've caught you at a good time, hopefully. Okay, so today we're going to go through a few things. Please, as I said, if you've got any questions as we go through, feel free to raise your hand. Just a quick update from myself on where we are on the tech side of things. Frank will then talk about country updates and where we are with data collection in the different geographies that we're targeting, and then a big chunk of time for Wada to talk about what we've been doing on the processing side, particularly on the de-identification of the street imagery, which has been the major activity we've been working on in the last few months to get to a point where we can share our street imagery with the membership. Our commitment to the Locust Charter means that we obviously have to get rid of faces and number plates, and we've worked very hard to get that. So big thanks to WADA to getting us to that point. And then we're going to have Paul Biddenset from the Centre for Appraisal Research Technology, CART, join us. He's not actually on the line right now. He will be joining us at 45 minutes past the hour. So we will continue to that point, and then hopefully he will join us. He's going to talk about using place imagery for automated valuation modeling in Turks and Caicos, and his experience with using that imagery to basically add attributes to valuation models that improve the sales estimate or the price estimation of properties. Very interesting, because what you can see is some, particularly for the Caribbean, some beautiful scenery overlooking the sea with swimming pools and things like that. But it's the statistical significance of those attributes as it affects sales price. So very interesting application using place imagery. Obviously, the resolution gives us that, affords us the ability to see some of those very detailed aspects of the amenities of properties. Then we'll have a Q&A. We might mix this up a bit if we're not hitting, if we've got a bit of time before Paul joins us, we might have a bit of quick Q&A before we get Paul talking to us. So I'll just go through what's new. Some nice new imagery from Tuvalu. You would have got the newsletter. We intend to send that out quarterly. It's noted here, but I hope you enjoy that format. Those of you who have received it and have read it, trying to keep it simple, punchy, engaging, telling you what's up on the tech side of things. So if you like that format, do let us know. If you want to hear anything, particularly in those newsletters, do let us know. We've been on the tech side, making applications for credits for the cloud. We were successful with NVIDIA's Inception program. We've just been granted $10,000 of GPUs, graphics processing unit credits in AWS, which gives us basically the money to use NVIDIA GPU machines in AWS for image processing. One of the big things that we do, obviously, with our images is graphics processing, and we need these GPU machines to be efficient and fast at doing this, and they cost money. So having credits from the NVIDIA program, which we are accepted into, which is fantastic, means that we have the money to be able to spin up these machines, do our processing, and spin them down when they're not being used. So we can be very efficient about using these machines, but they are very high-end spec machines. So very, very useful for us for our image processing. And the nice thing about this credit program is it steps up from 10K to 25 to 100. So at each incremental step, we can get more credits as we demonstrate the value of using these GPU machines. So we're very excited to be a member of that Inception program. Frank and I had the fantastic opportunity, I have to say, to go to Tuvalu in the Pacific to do some data collection at the end of March. That was quite a journey to get there, but we were very lucky to be able to fly the UAV and collect imagery for the main island of Funafuti, both aerial imagery and street imagery, which has been processed and been shared with the government and is going out on various channels via government, through partners, to demonstrate the utility of that image data for climate mitigation planning. So particularly in this case, flood or sea level rise and the impact of sea level rise on the island, which, as you can imagine, is a very low-lying atoll and at high risk of being submerged. So that was a hugely impactful piece of data collection that we've just done. We continue to write about what we're doing on our website. We've got some new, we keep writing use cases to demonstrate the utility of the imagery. I mean, this is really showing people, okay, you've got this imagery, what can you do with it? So whether it's heat island mapping, population estimates, vegetation mapping, those are the things that we're writing about and putting up onto the website. And we've also got the Tuvalu story as well. I mentioned the newsletter. That's, as I said, that will just keep you informed in between these technical working group meetings. If you want to write something about what you're doing, we're happy to incorporate that into our newsletter. We'd be very pleased to do that. If you want to write a use case with us, we're very pleased to include that as well. So we're open to any suggestions that you might have for us. Just a quick update on where we are with data collection and what's available in the stack, our spatiotemporal asset catalog. Do remember it is available. I'm not going to go through how to access it. We've been through that previously, but again, if you need to know how to get hold of the data, please just ping us. We'd be happy to respond to that. But just to give you an idea of where we are with our data, I think the most important thing since we last met is the fact that we are now able to share with you de-identified street imagery. That's, as I mentioned at the beginning, that's something that WADA has been working on. So we have a lot of street imagery that is available for use, and you can explore opportunities with machine learning on this terrestrial imagery, not just the aerial imagery. So things that you can see from the perspective of the street, naming of buildings, for example, assets, what street furniture, road condition, those are all possible avenues that you can explore with this street data. It is geotagged, so it will overlay with the aerial imagery. You can combine those two data sets together to look at from the aerial perspective, and then take a street view perspective of it as well to confirm what it is you're looking at. Tuvalu was very interested because they do pre and post disaster assessment, so they walk around dwellings after calamities and then sort of assess what the damage has been. So having the ability to go in with the street camera on a backpack, on a moped, and collect at a house level, and then use that for post-disaster planning is something that's hugely powerful to them. I think Frank and I discovered that we could go to pretty much anywhere on Tuvalu without much trouble, right? I think the only things that chased us were dogs, but that the fact that we could really get right up close to buildings and down footpaths and everything meant we got a pretty good coverage for the terrestrial side of things. So anyway, this is a list of the data. Just remember, for the aerial, we are delivering as collections. So these are geotagged JPEGs. To post-process, you need image processing software like Esri's ArcGIS Reality or Agisoft Metashape Pro or some other SFM, structure from motion processing software, to create the ortho images that you want to then use in your GIS. But we do process, we have been processing on behalf of government to deliver those geo-referenced images as well. So that's it. The street images are panoramas, and that means that there is a point basically, and then it's a 360 perspective of that particular point. You can spin around it and view what's around you. They're not viewable on typical image viewing software like Snagit or Paint or anything like that, because it's 360 viewers. But there are free, this is a mouthful, free 360 viewers out there. Try and say that, free 360 viewers that you can use to spin around this imagery. Just realized that was a real mouthful. I couldn't say it properly. Okay. One last thing. This is obviously just for members of the technical working group at the moment, this meeting, but we are going to have a public day. I decided, Denise, to call it the Place Open Day, which will be very much tech focused. But in a month's time, July 24th, we're going to have a public event and open it to everybody and anybody. We'll do the publication and announcement shortly. But if you have a use case, an idea, or anything that you want to present at that event, it'll be an hour long. So if you do want to present something, think of doing something within about 3 to 4 minutes worth of a video or a presentation. We'd be very happy to incorporate that. I think we have enough from the previous presentations on the TWG meetings. And by that, I mean, we've had Clark University, and we're going to have Paul speaking in a minute to have some material that we can share. But if you'd like to make a short video, even if it's just you talking about the utility of place imagery, we'd love to include that. And it really is an opportunity for us to upsell Place, right? We really want to drive membership, drive understanding what the data is and what you can do with it. So please think about how you might be able to contribute. Any way or shape or form is very much appreciated. And as I said, we'll be starting the announcements shortly. So that's it from me. Frank, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, much appreciated, Nigel. Happy to pick up and fill everyone in a little bit as to what we've been up to and what our pipeline looks like for the coming months, as well as do a little bit of a dive on where we've been collecting the Street View data. I want to go ahead and hit the next slide. Perfect. Well, as Nigel mentioned, the Tuvalu data collection in March, April has now been fully captured, processed, and is up to the site for you all to use. I think we're all very excited within Place as to having developed a very rapid workflow to take in fairly large sets of data, process it, and turn it around. That missing piece, of course, had been some of that Street View de-identification, but really excited as to what WADA's been able to accomplish. Looking ahead, we have a number of opportunities for data collection percolating in the Caribbean. I think organizationally, we really are appreciating some of the climactic windows we have in various parts of the world, which often do put pressure on some of our government partners to get things done to allow us to be there at the right time of year. Nigeria was really, hoping to get us out there, and now that they've finally got the paperwork done, it's the rainy season and doesn't make sense. Similarly, in the Caribbean, we have a couple of partners who are, crossing T's and dotting I's, but we also know that's a window in the Caribbean that begins to close in August and September. That said, our newest member, St. Vincent, we have penciled in for later this summer and hope those final approvals from civil aviation come through that will allow us to get that data in before the hurricane season ticks up. And certainly something we're hearing from all of our Caribbean partners is how warm the weather is and how ominous that is for the season ahead. We hope then into perhaps end the year with a little bit more after that Nigeria when we pick up in the dry season in October, potentially some more in the Caribbean to end the year in that November, December as it quiets down again. We have a number. I wish we could lock in a couple of more with the dates, but suffice to say a number of our partners or potential partners are all jockeying to get us in before the end of the year. So look forward to continuing to build out that data pipeline. I will say organizationally, it's always balancing those windows of data collection. The demand and our own funding and next steps is always an exciting challenge. And I would not at all be surprised to get a note and be on the road again in 2 weeks, but we have to play it by ear. So with that, we'll jump to the next slide and just talk a little bit about the street view and what that's looking like. Again, on the space bar, Turks and Caicos was a data collection in 2023. So it's taken a while, but very excited to have all of that data up. One of the things that's exciting for us is I think we're seeing more and more of the use cases around the place aerial, but less around the street view. We realize it's fresher data and less organizations have experience working with it. But we really look for your feedback as to what is possible and what might be most useful. I'll note we're using a number of different types of cameras depending on the context, from our our largest and the highest end Mosaic that we use whenever we can, to the middle of the road Insta360, all the way down to the GoPro Max, which is the backpack and for the tightest spaces. Our sense is the Mosaic presents the most flexibility, but look forward to any feedback from our members as you all use that data. Turks is a big one with over 800 kilometers of road spread across a number of islands. So take a look, some beautiful scenes. We can jump to the next slide. And Gila, similarly, this was a data collection in the very late 2023 across the entire island, over 300 kilometers of road. A very thorough data set, again, with the Insta360. Next. And then we were able to end 2023 in Malawi. Our focus was really on Zomba, although we actually did a portion of Lilongwe. In Zomba, we're looking at almost 300 kilometers of roadway to go along with that 70 square kilometers of aerial imagery, with a couple of gaps around military installations, etc. Part of our model is, of course, partnering with the governments to know where not to fly. This is a case where we use that larger Mosaic camera and beginning to work with some of those use cases. And finally, we'll jump to the next one. In Tuvalu, and a very detailed data set. One of the things we'll also see is with the different cameras, we can set the exposure from either different speeds or different distances, or capturing video. In this case, I think we're pulling every 10 meters, although we do have more data. It's just making it as useful as possible and not overloading. 10 meters seems to be the sweet spot. We can see the blue, if you can see a bit on the far right and the far left, indicates the GoPro, versus the red is the larger Mosaic. So even within the same jurisdictions, we are mixing the cameras. And with that, I think that's the update of where we are with place ground, or our data collection generally. It's exciting to see, and we'll hear more from Paul on this, but I know where he is now is actually presenting on some of this work with the International Association of Assessment Officers, and seeing what's been possible from the street view from that perspective is exciting. So look forward to hearing more from him. And with that, over to you, Wada.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our technical working group. So, okay, I will be speaking about the technical updates. As Frank mentioned, all these data sets from the ground, from place ground, were successfully de-identified after making a couple of strides in our de-identification workflow. In addition to that, I will also be speaking about the new use cases we developed for our most recent data set, Tuvalu. Okay, regarding the de-identification, in the last technical working group, I mentioned several steps that we go through after stitching the imagery, so creating 360s, collecting the EXIF headers, gathering it, and to ease the process until we get to the de-identification step. So we were stuck on that for a while. We did the training of the machine learning or the computer vision software model to detect faces and number plates. And as mentioned before, we were using YOLO, You Only Look Once, developed by Ultralytics, which is an open source software, computer vision software, to work with computer vision. So our approach was that we run the software on the full resolution of the images, which is the 6K resolution. That's the production resolution for our 360 data sets. When we do that, we get to yield less, as you can see, the bounding boxes, which determine the faces and number plates. The ones in green are the ones that have been detected. In red are missed, which either indicates false positives or true negatives in the accuracy assessment. In general, that result was less than 80% accurate when the statistic is calculated on each data set. So that was not acceptable. Then we moved to using a plugin for YOLO, which is called SAHI, Slicing Edit Hyperinference. Simply, it goes through each image, slices it into smaller, lower resolution images with overlap between them, and then runs the model on these slices. It resulted in an improved result on the accuracy, but again, it was not the acceptable accuracy for us. And in addition to that, it took so much time. So for example, using the first approach, each image in 6K resolution, we will get the results in a matter of seconds using the GPUs on the EC2 machine. Using SAHI, each image will take several minutes to process. Considering the number of images that we have, the time to process each data set will be unrealistically long. Then we moved to the third way, and this is the one that resulted us with the best accuracy. We moved to a two-step process where we used at first the YOLO pre-trained models on COCO dataset, which is models that detects about 80 classes. 5 of them were important to us, which is a person, a car, a motorcycle, a bus, or a truck. So within these 5 classes, we get to have our faces and number plates. The result of this step is text files for each image showing the classes that have been detected. The class, in addition to the coordinates of that class in each image. Then a crop of that image is created with its reference to the original image. And then these images going to the second step will be run again on YOLO using the pre-trained model we created on our custom dataset, which detects faces and number plates. Going through this approach yielded yielded the best accuracy that we can get, which is around 98% on average on most of the data sets. From then, after yielding these accepted results, we went to the blurring process and created or run the final step on these data sets and created the identified images. Moving to the next slide. Going to Tuvalu, our most recent data set from aerial and ground, we created 2 use cases. The first one being the solar power. So our main goal here was to assess the amount of power currently at the island and the development required after that, and how we can use place data to get to that point. So first thing, we used SRE's deep learning models to detect solar panels in the island, and that created vector polygon shapefiles, which shows the number of clusters that's available, in addition to the total area of these clusters, and with reference to literature on solar panels on kilowatts per square meter. We estimated the energy output or the energy capacity currently on the island to being about 1,700 kilowatts. Yeah, going forward. Yeah. Okay, then just to get to the potential of new panels being added and being efficient about adding these panels, we used also deep learning models to detect the houses or the housing footprints on the island. So it's a vector data or polygon shapefile that, yeah, okay. I think the presentation. Can you go back a little bit, Nigel? Okay. Okay, thank you. So with the building outlines created for the whole island, we have a base to add more attributes and information to be as a design input for the new extension of power to the grid. So next, okay. From the topographic analysis of the aerial imagery, we get the DSM and the DAM, which is a digital surface model, showing the roofs or showing all the features on the heights of all features on the island, in addition to digital terrain model showing the ground level. The difference between these two levels on each building outline would result on the height of each building. And that's one of the inputs for the new panels. Also, creating the aspect layer, which is also based on the topographic output. We get the direction of each pixel on each footprint of the house. So we get the area. We can calculate the area that's available for that's facing a certain direction between 0 to 360 degrees, which is adding to the efficiency of placing the solar panels on the area that's facing the sun for a longer period during the day. Next one. The slope also another product going built on the topographic layer that shows the previous one was the slope, and this one is the aspect. Yeah. Okay. The second use case that we developed also are an assessment of the water storage capacity on the island. So we run the deep learning model on the whole island to create vector points showing the presence of water tanks on the island. Also from the planimetric view of the orthomosaic, we could calculate the average or the actual existing diameter of each storage tank. In addition, from street view data, we calculate the height of the tank. From that, we estimated almost all the island have the same standard tank capacity, which is about 5 cubic meters. And from this vector data or calculated data, we estimated the presence of 1,890 tanks in the island, resulting in a total capacity of 9,450 cubic meters of storage facility, which then could be an input for any planning of extending the water storage infrastructure to have maybe add a systematic collection of tanks or systematic storage facility to serve certain area or for new development. I guess that's it from my side.
Thank you, Wada. Sorry, I didn't get your transitions quite right. I apologize. And Vivek, I see you're on the line, and I know you said we should catch up, but I hope this kind of spurs you to think about how we should go back to looking at AI on the imagery and the things that we can do with it. But we have, yeah, this has been particularly interesting for Tuvalu because, you know, all the challenges they faced. They had a drought recently. They have seasonal flooding. King Tides I think was before we went out in March, which had a big inundation on the island. And then there is potentially some investment coming in from, I think, the ADB on installation of solar panels. So having a kind of baseline against which they can assess current capacity and then future need is something that could be quite interesting for them. So, hey, Paul, you're here. So I don't know if anyone has, before we go over to Paul, if anyone's got any questions, observations, or comments about that. Grenville, you put your hand up, or was it a general?
I didn't mean to put my hand up. No, I didn't put my hand up, but I was wondering whether there's some way of moving towards kind of the property on this sort of data. In other words, is there an automated way to go from buildings to property boundaries? Whether you've given any thought to that.
Wada? Yes, I can see you smiling.
So, yeah, actually, the deep learning models are pretty diverse, and these two are just like a sample use case. So you can either use a deep learning model for detecting parcels, or you can develop your own model. But actually, parcels are a bit tricky because sometimes the boundary of the property are not that visually detected. If it's that kind of systematic and planned nicely, it can be detected to very high accuracy, or it can be less. So people in this exact field, people tend to start with machine learning, get the images, or get the vector data from the orthomosaics for the parcels, and then review manually and fix it. So that cuts a lot of time from the production of vector data from orthomosaic for parcels. But it is possible. There are some models on the library in Esri, and you can actually create a custom model that detects parcels in a certain area that you have.
Okay, thanks. Do they? This is, I guess, for Frank and Nigel, maybe. Are there fences on most of the boundaries, or is there nothing physical?
There wasn't. No, there weren't boundaries lines. There tended not to be.
In the case of Tuvalu, very rare.
There might be a path that might indicate some place. I mean, some do, but they're the more formal properties, maybe the embassies and commercial buildings. But
okay, thanks.
I think we should also just mention, in addition to the acquisition with the UAV, there was also a ground control point campaign that was going on. And we collected just under 40 ground control points over the main island of Funafuti. We didn't do the whole of Tuvalu because it's huge. I mean, it's massively spread out, but it was giving us positional accuracies as we expected, between 8 and 10 centimeters. And that meant it fit almost, well, it's pretty much like for like with 2019 imagery, which is collected by Fugro using an aircraft. So we've got some really nice time series data, which is positionally accurate to show what's been happening to the island. So again, confirming our approach in terms of the ability to acquire this data using a UAV, delivering a positionally accurate product that can then be used in machine learning, as we're demonstrating here. And now we can de-identify our street imagery. So basically what we can say to everybody is that we are production ready. I think this is an exciting milestone for us to have achieved. You go and Frank goes out into the field to collect the data. WADA can, with his magic, turns it around, and we have a product that we can deliver to our membership ready to use. So yeah, I think just a recognition of what WADA's been able to do over the last few months is worth noting. But anyway, thank you very much for that. No questions at this point. And Paul, you came in early, so thank you very much for joining us. And Frank says you just come off the back of a conference where you've been talking about the same thing, I think.
Yes. I think Frank and I gave the presentation yesterday.
Okay. All right. So do you want to introduce yourself, Paul? And then I guess you've got a presentation that you want to show, and I can stop sharing.
Yeah, very happy to.
Okay, over to you.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here today. My name is Paul Bedancet. My background is in property tax valuation modeling. I come from I guess my background is really econometrics, data science. I started working for governments, local governments, actually in Virginia in the United States about, a little over 10 years ago. Since then, I went on to work for a nonprofit called the International Association of Assessing Officers. This is about 9,000 member worldwide membership association, predominantly for government valuers and government appraisers. But we do a lot of GIS research, a lot of valuation statistical modeling research, and we're always looking for applications of aerial imagery. A lot of the good work that the folks over at Place are doing, and we partnered with them. Frank and I go back, years now. We met at the World Bank Conference a long time ago, and quickly found some paths of intersection. And we had this idea to bring in some place data and do some studies really to see how much it could improve mass valuation models. So in mass valuation, we're always trying to get more accurate, be more equitable with our valuations, because we need them to hold water with the public. We need them to hold water with the government. So it's always important that a lot of due diligence is accomplished, and that we can go to our stakeholders and say, hey, we did a good job. This is, our valuations are reflective of market value, and we are consistently reflective of market value for different properties. So let me go ahead and upload my slide deck here. And pardon me, I just came from a GoToMeeting, which is a little different. So now I got to get my bearings. It's like when you get in somebody else's car, and I'm just trying to figure out where the upload button is here for my slide deck.
Top right hand corner is a share button, Paul, if you see it.
It is yes, it's grayed out. Perhaps I do not have permissions.
Let me just make sure you can do that. Hang on. Let me find you.
Is that fixed now? Is it visible now, Paul?
Thank you so much.
That's
Thanks,
right.
Denise.
Oh, good.
Okay. How's that?
Looks good.
All right. So this was an exercise that Frank and I did using place data from Turks and Caicos Islands, and it's a very vibrant picture here. It was really nice, honestly. Spend a lot of time on computers, spend a lot of time, doing GIS, doing programming. Spending hours looking at these tropical waters did wonders for my mood. At the end of the workday, I felt like I was at the beach all day. So it was a very, very relaxing work as well. But just to talk about a little bit about what we did. So typically when you go to do mass valuation, the government has some sort of a sales registry or a database of transactions. And the government is legally tasked with estimating the market value of their properties with regard to the current markets, right? So markets change over time. Real estate markets change, supply changes, demand changes, inflation, tastes and preferences. So it's important from a tax policy standpoint that governments are able to recalculate properties to make sure that they're not unfairly assigning taxes on areas that shouldn't be paying them, so to speak. We want to allocate everyone's fair share to the tax bills. So in most instances, we would pull some data from the government registry. But what happens if the government doesn't have a registry? In this case, in Turks and Caicos, they did not have an existing registry, at least one that was not available to make mass valuation models. Well, you know, there's always a workaround, right? Well, most cases, not always. Most of the time, there's some sort of workaround that you can still get some estimates of market value. So typically, when countries do not have this database, they can go out, assuming that the laws allow them to, and assuming that they're not violating any sort of terms of use on the different websites that they collect this information from. We can use web scrapers to collect this information. So if you don't have a database of transactions where, you know, each row is a transaction and each column is a different property characteristic, you have, you know, the sale price, or in this case, the asking price, if we pull it from a listing website. And then you have the neighborhood or the province or the district. You also have the size of the property. If it's an apartment, you're just looking at the size of the apartment. If it's a detached house, you're also looking at the land. And then any other characteristics that you might have, perhaps the number of bathrooms, the number of floors. Typically, we want to include anything in our model that we suspect from our intuition, from our expertise as valuers and appraisers, anything that we suspect has a relationship with price, something that can be deterministic of price. Because if we can plug these characteristics into a model and tease out on average how much each bedroom affects price and how much each bathroom or different locations affect price, we can extract from this market data a working model, a mathematical model that represents the marketplace. And then we take that, once we've done our analysis and we find it, we can take that information and use it to estimate values for properties that haven't sold or for properties that are not for sale. So it's a great way to train our algorithms to learn what's driving markets, and then take that, and then we can apply that to all the properties in the jurisdiction to get an estimate of value. Obviously, these will be segmented by property types. You would never pull in every single property, you know, commercial, residential, agricultural, and cram it into one model. International property tax standards, such as the ones published by IAAO, they always recommend breaking these out into different property classes. So we want to, this instance, we pulled out 138 single family property listings. Now, typically when you're working with a database, you want to have a few hundred or a few thousand transactions. But again, we have to use what we have have. We have to get creative in how we can do the most with the limited data that we have. So even though we only have 138 sales, we can still get some pretty good indicators of the market, assuming that the market is you know, healthy, and that information is transparent between buyers and sellers, all that good stuff. So we'll go ahead and get into some more of this information. So what did we scrape for each property listing on this website? Well, we pulled the asking price, right? So this is going to be, for those of you who have ever taken a modeling course or a regression course, perhaps in college or perhaps some professional training, the price is going to be our dependent variable in our regression model. So this is the value that we're trying to estimate. This is the value that we're trying to predict. And then we scrape the rest of the information that we're going to use to predict that dependent variable. So our independent variables, we're pulling in the geographic area. In this website, we had two geographic areas. We had one that was a little bit larger, perhaps a district, and then we had these sub-geographic areas that were closer to neighborhoods. So because real estate supply and demand fluctuate so much by location, it's always going to be, our models are always going to get better the more geographic information we can feed into it. We also have the number of full bathrooms and the number of half bathrooms in each property. We have the floor space, which is in square feet. And then we also have the lot size, which is in acreage. And then we have the year built of the property. So this is always helpful too, because these real estate assets depreciate over time, right? They have an economic life. So if we can feed in the age of each of these properties, we can estimate the depreciation line of these. And also, year built is always going to be correlated with other value factors, different, desirability. Sometimes older properties are more dilapidated, and that's typically the case. But sometimes the oldest properties are sometimes if they're even historic properties, or they're located, typically the people who got there first had the best location. So sometimes year can also be correlated with positive factors. So it's important that we bring that into the model.
Paul, just say, if you're meant to be advancing the slides, we're seeing your first slide at the moment, just in case.
Interesting. I am advancing the slides. That's very strange. Let's try this.
Now it's moved now, so that's
Perhaps
fine.
we'll just leave it then in the presentation mode, if that's okay.
Yeah. If you just want to click through the ones, we'll see them. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Nigel.
Thanks. Okay.
So we have some good data, right? Just getting started out, some baseline data points. From an economic standpoint, from a theoretical appraisal standpoint, we would expect these to be very correlated with price or have some sort of patterns. But we also know that there's a lot of other things that are likely going to influence value that we don't actually have from this website. So this is where the place data really came in. So we said, all right, well, let's go to each sale. We're going to geocode it and find the latitude, longitude, and then we're going to zoom in and pull up the place imagery, and then we're going to capture some other key property characteristics. So this is one example. We can zoom in and we can see whether or not the property has a pool. This is something that perhaps it's given on the website. Sometimes it's given in the in a text column where the listing agent is putting some information in there, but it's not easily extractable. If we're doing mass valuation, we need we don't have time to go and read necessarily all of the notes, especially if we're using hundreds or thousands of properties even. So place data really gives us a really quick way for us to have this jump out at us. I'm sure WADA could program some pretty sophisticated stuff that could automatically detect a pool. We're not there yet in the research phase, but maybe something later. But this was done. We just looked at it and then marked it in the database. But there are tools out there that can be used to classify these, neural networks, image classifiers that can be used to detect these properties. I would like to move on to this next one here. We pulled in the oceanfront status, right? So properties that are going to be on the oceanfront typically have much more demand than the ones that are not located on the ocean. You've got views, you've got accessibility, you've got no neighbors on that side. There's a lot of reasons why a buyer may be willing to pay a lot more for an oceanfront property as opposed to a similar property that's landlocked. We also pulled in Turks and Caicos. There's a lot of properties that are on the Chalk Sound. So it's not on the ocean, but it's on another nice body of water that has a lot of the, we can expect lots of the typical desirability that are associated with beachfront properties. Just probably, typically we don't expect it to be as high in value as the properties on the beach, but still more value than the properties that are just on the land with no water access. We were also able to capture the properties that were located on the channels or canals. There's a lot of these in Turks and Caicos. And again, you've got access to water. It looks like a lot of these folks have boats. If I wish I owned a boat, maybe one day. If you have a boat and you've got demand to keep your boat at your house and go in the water, obviously this can bid up prices. So we want to be able to pull this into our models and test it, because we always, we can always theorize, and we always should theorize the models, or excuse me, the variables that we're including in our models, the things that we expect to be correlated with value, but we have to have market evidence before we can tax individuals on this, right? So ethically, scientifically, we need evidence before we can apply value to properties. Because sometimes, for whatever reason, certain variables we expect to really be driving value after you account for the size and the neighborhood. Sometimes they don't have as much of an influence, or sometimes the model can't find a statistically significant relationship. So it is always very important. So again, we decided to break up the waterfront. We didn't just want to have a blanket waterfront variable. We wanted to make sure that we looked at them separately, because theoretically, these could have greatly different values, associated relationships with value. So we were able to pull in this data, and then we were also able to use the place imagery to do some data quality control. So international best practices, research standards for AVMs, automated valuation models, they're always stressing the importance of accurate property data, right? Garbage in equals garbage out is very much at play here. If we feed in data that is outdated, or if we feed in data that is incorrect, and then we put it into our models, it's going to compromise our valuations. The further off we are from the correct, true state of the property, the worse the valuations will be. So it's very important that we use this data to do some quality control. For governments, if we start to implement compromised valuations into our property taxes and we get really inequitable, inaccurate valuations, this has a lot of costs, indirect and direct costs for governments. There can be, inquiries, complaints, and appeals coming into the office, calling the office, depleting staff resources and time. In some instances, if the government gets sued, this can, impose legal fees, not just on the governments, but also on the taxpayers. Even if it doesn't get to court, we can still have a lack of acceptance and a lack of participation from the public. And this is very important in developing countries, particularly ones that are just getting perhaps a market-based property tax system off the ground. A lot of folks might just say, hey, I'm not paying that. And oftentimes, this property tax is used to collect revenue that'll fund law enforcement and property tax enforcement. And if it's in the early stages, the government may not have a way to enforce the property tax. So again, good governance, good property tax transparency goes a long way. We always want to promote public trust and be thinking about our stakeholders as we're doing these. So we use the place imagery to first we wanted to confirm that when we scraped a listing and we looked at it on the spreadsheet, we wanted to take it out of the spreadsheet and look at it on a map. Because if it said that there was a residential building there, we wanted to ensure that there actually was a residential building. Sometimes, even on listing websites, data can be inaccurate. Sometimes it says a property is in a certain location and it's not. So you can see here on the left-hand side, there was an instance, for example, in this property, it said that there was a building here. However, when we looked at the place data, we saw that this was just vacant land. Another example, on the right-hand property, we zoomed in and we were able to say, oh, this property, the data set says it's a residential property, but this is clearly a commercial industrial property. You can't quite tell very well because I shrunk the image down, but when you zoom in, it's very clear that this is some sort of it's got a warehouse, it's got a bunch of commercial industrial personal property on there. So in these instances, to follow international standards, we have to remove them, right? Because let's say we go to court, let's say we have a taxpayer come in and they say, well, what sales did you study? We say, oh, we pulled in these sales. And they said, that's not even a house, that's land, or that's a commercial property. These are they might seem like little things, but they can quickly add up and cause a government to lose an appeal or even lose trust from the taxpayers themselves. So this step helps us promote model accuracy and defensibility. So it's helping us in two ways. so we first made a baseline regression model. We created this to test whether prices could be reasonably estimated or predicted given these respective features that we're looking at. We wanted to see if the model could find consistent patterns between the property features or characteristics and the asking price. So if a feature was deemed to be statistically significant, so if the model found consistent patterns, we include it in the model. Otherwise, we kick it out, because this is like, I always say modeling is like plants. You know, when you prune a plant, if you trim off the dead leaves, the other ones can thrive more and be more helpful, be more, they may flourish and be healthy. Same way we're looking at models, right? If we can get rid of some of these variables in a model that aren't making sense, the model can do a better job getting clarity of what's actually influencing price. So it's very, very helpful, especially as we're explaining these to taxpayers and other members of government. So then what happens is we do this and it yields this mathematical formula that we can say, all right, using these piecemeal adjustments, we can arrive at a total estimate of value. We can see how much the size on average impacts price. We can see how much a property's location influences price, or the number of bathrooms it has. And we can use this to get a total estimate of value for each property that's listed, as well as each property that's not listed. We also brought in some fancy machine learning algorithms that can help shed light on the most important variables, because in this instance, we were trying to show Turks and Caicos government how, which variables they should be tracking as they go to create a cadastre themselves and populate their own database. So we're looking at some model evaluation criteria. First of all, before I go too deep in the weeds, I do want to check with Nigel. Nigel, how much time do we have allocated for this? I don't want to ramble too much, but I also, if we have some time, I'd like to take advantage of it.
Yeah, no, if you can, I'd say 10 more minutes, and that would be fine. Then that gives us 20 minutes.
Perfect. I'll skip over a lot of the.
Okay, Jess, thank you very much, Jess, for joining. We'll get the recording out. All right. Yeah, Paul, if you want to do it on 10, that gives us 20 minutes for questions. So perfect.
Perfect. So how are we going to judge our models? What do we use to determine whether or not they are accurate or reasonably accurate at determining or estimating market value? The first thing we look at is this accuracy score. If you've ever taken a modeling course, you probably quickly learned about the adjusted R-square. This is a model that this is a value that gets spit out in a regression model. It's a value between 0 and 1 that represents a percentage, either 0% to 100%. So it indicates how much variation in the sale price the model can explain or predict. So, if you put in just size, you might see that this explains 30% of the variation in the sale price. And then we put in a variable for size and location, and you see that, okay, now the model is getting up to 50% variation, explanatory power. And then you can track how much of these variables are influencing the model's performance. What's a good or a reasonable score to have? You see models between 70% and 90% being the best. If you have a model that says it's better than 90%, there's a good chance there's some false noise going in there, and the model's tricking itself. It's overfitting, or it's doing something that isn't that as good as it thinks it is, and you have to sort those problems out. So typically, the sweet spot, you want to have at least 70% about, and no more than 90%. But middle income and transitioning countries, because of the data limitations, because of the less available, not as readily available data, or perhaps less transparent markets, we typically see this between 50 and 70%. So it's more important. The IAAO, that the nonprofit that I used to work for earlier, that I spoke about, that authors these standards, they have their own metrics, their own statistics for uniformity and accuracy. So we really rely on these more. We've got a few of those that we'll be talking about in more detail as we get to the results. So we looked at a few different models, and I don't want to get into too much of the statistical detail, but we looked at one model where we used the web scrape data only. in an additive sense. Then we pulled in another regression model, which is multiplicative. So this is, you don't need to know this too much unless you're a modeler, but just two different ways to, there's a lot of different ways to run a model. These are just two different common ways to kind of get two different opinions, if you will. Sometimes you look at the median, sometimes you look at the mean, sometimes you look at the mode, right? It's just different ways of inspecting these relationships that we can learn different patterns from. So then to compare that, we took just the baseline models of what we got from the website only, and then we ran two more models where we added in the variables from the place data. So we were able to add in the we saw that oceanfront status and pool status and channel, canal, waterfront status were significant. So we were able to increase the explanatory power in these models. Long story short, as a summary, if you look at the first two models, which were just the web scraped data, we're only getting around 55 to 69% of the variation explained in the sale price. Looking at our ratio studies, that are these statistical metrics that measure our accuracy, our uniformity, and whether or not we're being consistent and fair to the low-priced property owners and the high-priced property owners, right? We always want to make sure we're not giving any favoritism. We see that the first two models with just using web scrape data, they failed these ratio studies. So in red means that they did not pass standards for IAAO accuracy, uniformity, and equity, right? The big three that we need to hit to be good government workers, right? But once we added in the place data, once we added in variables that we are, not only that, but also to trim the pulling out those properties that were incorrect, that the commercial properties or the vacant properties, and then adding those other variables, we were able to increase the percent explained to 70 to 78%. And you see that we are actually able to pass the IAAO standards. So this was great. I mean, if even though it was just only a test run, this suggests some great things for governments that, hey, if your back is up against a wall and you're trying to estimate market value and you only have so much data, and again, Frank loves this. Frank likes this comparative analysis or comparative saying, but being able to squeeze more juice out of your lemons or your oranges, right? So you gotta get more juice, and you don't have any more data. You don't have any more, you don't have a budget. You don't have a staff that can go out there and collect a bunch of information. Or if you do, it might take many months or even a couple of years. Being able to bring in this place data allowed us to efficiently, quickly, safely, greenly increase our value, our valuation accuracy, and pass these standards. So very, very big results here. We saw that, some other things we learned, pools on average were associated with a price increase of 30%. We saw that on average, oceanfront properties sold for 56% more than properties that were not on the oceanfront. So again, if we're not capturing that in our models, I mean, no surprise that we were failing, right? I mean, that's a big differential that we were failing to account. And if we're government workers, it's our duty to fairly allocate our taxes. So this was very helpful. And also we saw that, another interesting result, properties on the channel and canal on average sold for 45% more. Again, looking at our machine learning models to see what was driving value, we saw obviously floor space was the biggest driver. So that's no surprise. Bigger properties sell more. You're getting more stuff. They generally have much higher demand. And we see this represented in the values. Oceanfront status, also a big driver. We see, even though it was to a smaller degree, we still see influences from age, bathrooms, latitude, longitude, so location, lot size, and then whether or not it was on the channel or the canal, as well as the pool status. We can quickly, we can visualize these if we want to see the average price impact. Floor space, again, we see it having a big increase on value. Oceanfront status. Age, we see this depreciation as we expect. Older properties sell for less. More bathrooms are adding more value. Larger lot size have larger value increments. After 2 acres, the increments drive up considerably. And I'd like to skip forward a little bit, but some last major takeaways I want to give us. A lot of people say, well, can't we just use Google Maps? If you have place imagery, you're doing much better than Google Maps. So notice that they even said that this was a 2004. Well, some of these we noticed were a little outdated, even though it said 2024. I said 2024 copyright. Place imagery on the left, it allowed us to zoom in on these pools and really notice them, and they jumped out at us, right? Whether you're doing this with manual review or if you're doing it with some sort of an image classifier or a neural network, it would have a hard time picking up that this was a pool. This is the same property, right? We're zoomed in on the left with place imagery, and this is as close as we can get with Google. But to me, to my eye, that looks like it could be a shed. It looks like it could be a house or a barn. That doesn't jump out at me as a pool. But having the better resolution, having the better image clarity and color, place imagery allow these pools to be discovered more easily. Again, this is one here. It's the same property. It's under a canopy, but because of the clear place imagery, you can really see how this pool jumps out at you. And you can say, oh, we almost missed that. It's hiding underneath the canopy from the sun. But trying to differentiate that in this Google image to the right, very difficult. Some more, even though the Google image states that there is that these were taken in 2024, the place imagery were more current, right? So more reflective of the current state of the property. So we see here that even though Google thinks that there's no property here on this land, if we zoom in on this place imagery, we can see that it looks like there's already some structure and the walls of another one. And this looks to be some sort of a shipping container with some building supplies. So we can see new construction. Very, very important if we are looking to populate cadastres and determine where new construction is, to make sure we get it on our books and that we can tax it accordingly. Again, this is a property where on the right, it doesn't look like there's any buildings there because of the coloring. But if we zoom in on the place imagery, we're able to see that there are actually distinct houses in these properties that we didn't see earlier. Again, despite the 2024 copyright claim, this is the same property. We see what was, sand roads and what looks like forests and trails is now a paved road with a lot of buildings. So again, being able to discover more properties, being able to uncover them so we can get them on our books and tax them. This is one, again, that the Google imagery did not have the new construction. So it's very helpful in gauging this. And, there's going to be more construction here too along the way, it looks like. Eventually, this fellow's waterfront, and this is the beach here, his waterfront view is going to disappear. So in countries where there's a more tenured property tax system, if people are losing views of the beach, well, you can expect their value is going to drop off. So this is also helpful down the road in future years for valuation, to be able to adjust people's values accordingly. Because if you can bet, if you're taxing somebody as they have an ocean view and they don't, that can be an angry taxpayer or an appeal. And our last slide here before we get to the summary and conclusions, we can use place imagery to also populate core physical attributes in a cadastre or government database, not just building footprints, but also other property attributes, that are associated with value. We saw tangible positive evidence of including waterfront status and pool status, but there's a lot more. We haven't looked at solar panels. There wasn't a whole lot in this data set that I noticed. There could be more in the future, but again, being able to identify things that capture value and incorporating them into our models. So very, very, very helpful. Summary and conclusions. We did a proof of concept where a country that did not have a ready-to-go sales registry to make valuation models, we extracted listing data from real estate websites. We extracted basic property characteristics, but using place imagery, we were able to get a whole lot more, right? So we brought in oceanfront status, pool status, chalk sound waterfront status, channel canal waterfront status, and we were able to plug these into models to get better accuracy scores. So not only did they increase our accuracy from the 50-60% range up to the 70 to 78% range, but we were also then able to pass our IAAO standard requirements for valuation and accuracy. So place imagery made the difference. Also, specifically, place data corrected for what's called horizontal inequity. So what does that mean? That means that our valuations are unfair as we go from different types of properties because our valuations are not consistently accurate. So this is something that place data allowed us to correct, which is very helpful from a tax policy standpoint. It also allowed us to uncover the drivers of value that we can make recommendations to the government. We could see that the more advanced machine learning algorithms confirmed all of our property value drivers as well. And we really found that the place imagery, because of its superior color, because of its more, it was more recent, because it had better shading and resolution, it allowed us to better identify pools, buildings, new construction, and other things that tax assessors need to be considering for value. So I think that place imagery shows great promise, not only for improving our valuation models, but also for governments to populate our core physical attributes that we need for our mass valuation systems. So all that being said, I'll hand it back over to you, Nigel. I welcome any questions or comments, and my email address is on the screen too. If you have something you'd like to discuss with me, later down the road, please do take note, and I'll be happy to help out any way I can. So, Nigel, over to you, sir.
Fantastic, Paul. I just love the enthusiasm. I love the info. I mean, this is terribly revealing. It's extraordinarily revealing. Just jealous we don't live there, right?
Yeah, I know, right?
We have actually lost a few people, but we'll share your email out at the end of when we do a posting of their recording. Trevor, you're on the line. I think you had a question from Kevin, so over to you, and you got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. That was very interesting. Are you guys hearing me?
Yes.
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah. Good. So this is a question from Kevin Bartel, and it gets I think the background to this is that you've got these old timers who are sort of stuck in the world of having to visit each property versus the newer world where you're trying to do this in an automated fashion. So his specific question is, for valuation professionals, are the terms automated valuation models and mass valuation models considered synonymous? If not, what are the differences?
That's a great question. Absolutely. So to me, they are synonymous. The terms sometimes they take on their own colloquial definitions depending on who you ask in the industry. When I always tell people, hey, automated valuation models, the term automated scares people, but it's the same as a CAMA model or a computer assisted mass appraisal model or a market model. The term automated scares people because they think it's automated in its development, but actually when it's developed, we don't just cram everything in there and pull a lever and trust whatever it spits out. It's a very cyclical process. For example, I'm working in Moldova right now, creating mass valuation models, and we've been working on them, some of them for 3 years. Some of them were up and running within 6 months, but some of them take more time. So the automation comes after you've spent all this time programming, and then you meet with the appraisers and you meet with the valuers because you need their local expertise, right? And you say, hey, perfect example was Moldova. I said, the first apartment model I made for them, they said, Paul, your model is okay. It's wrong. I said, okay, how's it wrong? They said, well, you're not assigning any, you're not subtracting value from the top floor apartments. I said, why would I subtract value from the top floor? That's the best view. That's always the highest property value. And they said, well, not in Moldova, and I've since learned that was my first exposure into these middle income and developing countries where you have an apartment building, the highest floor, number one, doesn't have the heat insulation from the floor above it. So you have to pay more in utility costs. Number two, lots of the time, if the utilities aren't very strong, the water has a hard time. The water pressure doesn't quite reach the top floor. Some people have to have, if you're on the top floor, you are required, financially required to cover the maintenance of the roof. So if it leaks, you have to account for that. And these are just widely accepted. All the real estate professionals, all the buyers, all the sellers in the industry agree, no, these need to be lower. So you need to always work with the appraisers, even if it is an automated valuation model, right? We're working with the appraisers, we're getting their input, we're saying, okay, thanks. Now that I have your information, I'm going to go make a variable and assign that, and we're going to see what happens. And you do some more, you roll up your sleeves, you get, do some more analysis. I call them automated valuation models because of that's the main name with the IAAO. It's a very common term, but I've noticed in some countries, the second you say automated, you've lost your audience. So I try to typically call them market models or mass appraisal models, but I very much think that they even though we're using them for mass, we can still use them for the appraisers, the old school folks, right? Who the one property appraisers, they can still use these to get better adjustments, even if they are using them. So I think I rambled a little bit, but I think I did address the question. But yes, in my definition, they are the same thing.
Great, thank you.
Any other, Granville, you got any other questions?
Not on this thing, but I had a quick question on the public day that you said was going to happen on the 24th of July.
Yeah.
Do you have a time set for that? Because I didn't see a time on that slide.
So we do it at the same time as this. So 10 a.m. daylight time, Eastern Daylight.
Great, thanks.
I've even got my acronyms right, and now not EST, but EDT. I say it correctly.
I learned that yesterday. Yeah, I learned that yesterday at the IPTI conference. I said EDT. Is that the same as EST? I better confirm.
Well, anyway, I think that's, we can probably, because I think that's it. There's no one else on the line right now. So, Paul, we can give you some time back. First of all, very big thank you from Place for taking the time to present. Again, it's hugely fascinating to see it being used, and that's what we want to demonstrate. So I hope you'll be free to join the open day on, you missed that, July 24th. We're having an open day. We're calling it the Place Open Day, which will be open to everybody. It's not just a technical working group, and we'll go through in an hour. Short. We'll give you like 10 minutes shorter than that, 4 to 5 minutes, just to present quick snippet of what you've been doing with Place Data, but more will come on that. But we'd very much appreciate you presenting. Great.
Yeah, I'll enjoy that.
Okay. So anyway, all right. So Granville, thanks for joining. Any questions on machine learning or anything like that, do get in touch. Wada's there to help. We're learning a lot. We've learned a lot. We continue to learn and push forward. So team, anyone want to add anything before we finish? Wada, Frank, Denise, anything to close with?
No, but thank you, Paul.
Yeah.
Thank you, Frank. Good to see you.
Okay.
Wada.
Well, thanks everybody. We can head off. Thanks again. All the best to everybody. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.